Seafarer's Cookbook. Today I'm going to be running through the steps of making bread. So what I have laid out here are just the basic ingredients for a basic white loaf of bread. Now, I'm going to go through each item and tell you a little bit about, as we're going through, I'm going to tell you what their function is, and because if you know why you're doing things, you can make better decisions as to, is this right, or do I need more of this, or does it need more time? So hopefully when you are finished with this video, you will be able to make a loaf of bread. Anymore, I have the recipe memorized, I just do it. So I don't even need to look at a book or anything anymore because there's only a few ingredients. So let's get started. Here I have some warm water. Now I don't go beyond 110 degrees, so it's just from the tap, warm. Now, when I pour it into this bowl is a little cold, so it's going to come down a couple degrees, but that's okay. So next, I add my yeast. I have just regular dry active yeast. You could use cake yeast. You could use fast acting yeast. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you have the right amount. Now, I have a recipe that takes just one packet of yeast, and that's usually about, I don't know, a couple tablespoons or a tablespoon, something like around there. So I'll link the recipe below, and it'll have the exact, if you have a big thing of yeast, you can determine how much you need by tablespoons. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sprinkle this over the top. I don't want to get a real big lump in there or anything. So the yeast is a single cell living organism. So it's in the dormant stage when you bring it out of the package, and it needs food and it needs moisture to bring it back alive. So I have the moisture in there, which is the water, and it needs warmth. So it's warming up, it's starting to become alive, and what happens is each of those little guys eat sugar is their food, and so they eat that and they expel gas. That's why it bubbles up. And when it's in the bread, in the dough mixture, that's what makes it rise. So I can already see that it's soaking in, it's starting to bubble up. You can smell the yeasty smell. So in order to give a little bit of sweetness and to give the yeast a little chance to really do their best, to be their best selves, we're gonna add a little bit of sugar in there. That's about a tablespoon of sugar. Now I have my yeast, it's set about 5 minutes in the warm water with the sugar, and it's nice and foamy. I can smell it, it smells good. So the next step is I'm gonna add my salt and my flour. Now I'm not going to add all of the flour. I'm gonna add most of the flour, because there's a lot of things that affect the how much flour you need. I live in Florida. If it's summertime, I know I'll need less because there's a lot of moisture that gets into the flour. So and depends on the flour you use also. So there's a lot of different variables, and I want to mix it and see, is it coming off the sides? Is it sticky? What does it look like? So I'm gonna go ahead, mix this for until it forms a dough, and then I will decide, do I need more? Is it okay? So that's what I'm gonna do. I don't wanna ever say, boy, I wish I would have put less flour in there, because at that point, it's too late. So I'm using a dough hook. If you don't have a dough hook, you can mix this by hand, and then later on in the video I'll show you how to knead it. Now I'm gonna let this mix, and it should be climbing up the hook. The dough should be climbing up the hook, and the sides of the bowl should be clean and smooth. I mean, there might be a little bit of stuff on there, but it shouldn't be sticking to the sides. So I can let this go for about 6 minutes or so, 6 to 8 minutes. And what it's doing is, I mean, you've all heard of gluten, I'm sure, because everything has to be gluten-free, but gluten is a protein in flour. And what it does when you work with it, when you knead it, is it allows the strands to stretch. So the more you work it, the more stretchy it gets. And you want that, because when your bread is here and the yeast expels the gas, it allows the bread to rise. That's why you want to develop your gluten. So I'm gonna just leave that on, maybe like a low setting on the mixer, and then let it go for about 8 minutes, then 6 to 8 minutes. Then I'm gonna test it to see if it's stretchy or not. Now, let me just turn that off for a minute, and I'm gonna show you what it looks like. So it's a little bit tacky, but not too bad. Now, for those of you who are kneading your dough, once you mix it by hand, your hands are going to be all sticky and full of dough. But once you get that all mixed up and it looks like this, we want to put your dough down. I put some flour there, and I want to take the top of the dough, fold it onto the bottom, and then push it. And then turn it and do the same thing. So each turn, I bring it over, push it out, bring it over, push it out. So I fold it onto itself and then push it, turn it, and now this is a little, you'll see it gets a little tacky between, so I add a little more flour, push it, turn it, fold it onto itself. Push it, turn it, fold it onto itself. Now, you just want to keep on doing this. This could take up to 10 minutes, but the real telltale is, like right now when I rip, it rips. It doesn't stretch. So you want to knead it until it doesn't rip. It stretches when you pull it. So I'm going to just finish this one by hand, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I've kneaded my dough for about 8 minutes or so, and it's nice and stretchy. It's not ripping, and it's nice and smooth, not sticky. And so I'm ready to let it proof. Proofing is when you let the yeast do its job and it will double in size. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for this dough to double in size. So what I usually do is, like, my oven is on, so I'm going to put it on top of the oven, not inside, but on top, so it's nice and warm, because it needs some warmth in order to grow. So what I'm going to do is, I just have a stainless steel bowl here. I'm going to put a little vegetable oil. You use whatever you have. A little bit of oil there so that it doesn't stick. And I'm going to put my dough in, and I'm going to put a little bit of oil on top of the dough, kind of like you're putting suntan lotion on. Not too much. And then I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap and wait till it doubles in size. This could take anywhere from, depending on the yeast you're using and how much sugar you have in there, sometimes it's really fast, and sometimes it could take up to an hour and a half, 2 hours. So we'll see. All right, so our dough has doubled in size. It looks nice and puffy, And the one thing we want to do to check on this, to see if it's really ready, is when I push in, it doesn't bounce right back out. My fingerprint leaves a mark there. So that tells me that it's relaxed, it's gone all it can go, and it's ready to be turned into a loaf, which is the next step. Well, first you'll see. So the actual next step is punching it down. Just give it a couple punches, and what that does is it moves the yeast to a new food source, gets all the air out of there, moves the yeast to a new food source. So then I'm going to knead it back into a nice little shape again, and I'm going to round it. What rounding is I kind of just bring all of the edges into the palm of my hand, so it's a nice round piece of dough. Now, there's a thing called bench resting. So bench resting is I just beat this up, I just, knead it a little bit, rounded it, and it needs a couple minutes to recover. So bench resting, depending on the dough, it could be just a few minutes, up to 10 minutes. What I don't want is it to get dried out. So I'm going to put some damp paper towels over that and give it a few minutes so that it can just relax. All right, so after bench resting, I remove my damp paper towels, and I want to make this into, I'm just going to make a plain freeform loaf out of this. And how you do that is I turn it over to the side where all the raw edges are. And I just want to kind of stretch it out a little bit. Flatten it out, stretch it out some more. And we're about ready. So what I want to do is I want to just fold the edges over, and it's okay that, the shape of it is kind of like this. So that's what I want. So I'm just going to push and roll it onto itself. And what I want is a really good seam on the bottom that's really held together, because if it's not, it'll come apart and your bread will look kind of funny. So I do that. I want to make sure I can stretch it out a little bit, make sure that it is even, tapers towards the edge, thicker in the middle, and there's my loaf. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a regular sharp French knife, sharp, and I'm going to score it. Not going down too far into the dough, but just enough that it'll, have a little, see baguettes with that little diagonal cut on them. And I'm going to put some egg wash on there. Now I'm using a little bit of milk, some beaten egg, and then I add a little milk to it. You want to put it on at this point. This will keep it from getting dry. And the purpose of the egg wash is to give the dough color as it cooks. The milk has lactose in it, which is the sugar, and the yolk will also give it some color. So I'm looking for color with that. All right, so our loaf has doubled in size, just about, and I can still leave a fingerprint in there, and it's all ready to go. So I'm going to put it in the oven at 350, and I'm going to time it for 20 minutes. What I'm looking for, it could take longer, but I know it's going to take longer than 20 minutes. So that's why I'm setting it for 20 minutes. What I'm looking for is I'm trying to get you out of the habit of following a recipe. So what I'm looking for is, this is going to be nice and golden, and I have it on parchment lined sheet tray, and like when I lift it, it's going to feel really light for its size. And if I tap it, it's going to sound hollow. So I'm going to put this in the oven, time it for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I'm going to evaluate it and see how much, if I have to let it on longer, you know, maybe I think, well, let's give it another 5 minutes and see how we are then. All right, so I brought the bread out of the oven. It feels light for its size. It's got a nice golden color, so I know it's done. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my stick of butter and put a nice little coating. This will make it, give it a little glaze, like a little shine to the top, and also give it a little flavor as well. So just a little bit, just enough for a little shine. And when I'm going to wait at least 10 minutes before I cut it. If I cut it now, it's gonna get all gummy and weird because it's just too hot. It's not completely done cooking yet. So we're gonna let it cool and then slice it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll link all the information for this video, the recipe, and I have a couple of other things to link below. You can find the double recipe in Seafarer's Cookbook 2020. And I hope this helps you be able to be more confident in baking bread and knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. Thanks for watching.